Energy Transition, episode number 82. Our topic today is Sunak broke the silence. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Please let me share uh, from BBC, a summary from BBC. It's very useful. The UK will still hit net zero by 2050. I believe in net zero. Sunak said the ban on new petrol and diesel car sales is being pushed back from 2030 to 2035, 5 years more. Good. The timeline on replacing the boilers is being relaxed. Oh, good. The head of independent committee called Sunak's speech wishful thinking. The change in car policy was criticized by Ford, but welcomed by Jaguar and Land Rover, which called it pragmatic. So,
Yeah.
the first point, please. Sunak destroyed the silent agreement. Why, Irina? Slap.
He he spoke the unspeakable. He talked about the cost of the transition on people, and kudos to him for doing this. I doubt he did it voluntarily. I think reality just forced him to admit it, that it will not be cheap, which all of us and many other people have been saying for years. Some people have even made calculations that it will not be cheap. And what we have got from the climate crusaders is, yeah, but it will be even more expensive if we do not work towards net zero. That's the only argument they have, even though they've started more and more openly admitting that it will be even more expensive than we thought in the past. It's going to cost more. So now he's probably one of the very few politicians, and probably the first one in actual power, who comes out and says it. Not directly, I don't think he said it directly, but he suggested that it will be tough on the people, which is why he's doing these tweaks to the Tories' net zero plans.
So tell me, it means business pragmatism, isn't it?
Well, it's political pragmatism. I don't know about business. I mean, the fact that we're not even discussing the idea of banning a vehicle is the wrong thing to do in a democracy. If we're a free market economy, we shouldn't be banning things like vehicles, because then you're basically in the Soviet Union, where they'll have one car and then that's the one. If you're lucky, if you're like in China and you get to win the license plate lottery, then you can have a vehicle. But the fact that he's being praised for delaying the banning of a vehicle. But I say that it's a political pragmatism because I think they've been reading the poll numbers, and the poll numbers are devastating for the Tories. And the Labor doesn't care because they figure they're going to win either way, and they're going to double down on net zero, make it quicker. So as long as they just let the Tories keep shooting themselves in the foot, they figure they've got an in. There was a by-election in London, or an area just outside of London, and the biggest issue was this expanded ultra low emission zone that Sadiq Khan brought in and was bragging about at the UN last week. And the people resoundingly said, no, we don't want this. This is ridiculous. It's constraining our freedoms. We're supposed to be a free society, and net zero is anything but about freedom. And so we want you to reconsider what you're doing, not just the cost. The cost is, exorbitant and will cripple people, put them into energy poverty. But a lot of the technologies they're banking on don't work. And so you're going to end up with an unreliable grid. You get heat pumps that don't keep your house warm. So it's, they're, from a political perspective, if they want any chance at all of winning the election, they need to even go further than these little baby steps that they put forward last week.
But how will people vote for Labour when Labour is even more pro net zero?
I know.
That
It's
is
big. People feel like they
conservative.
have no choice, that there's the Liberal Democrats there who are just as crazy about net zero as the
Yeah.
Conservatives, and Labor's even worse. So they feel like, okay, well, who do we vote for? Who do we vote for in these circumstances? So I don't know what the next 8 months are gonna do, but it'll be interesting times here in the UK.
Yeah, very.
Interesting. David, do you expect that Western governments, another like United States, France, could apply the same example of UK?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and I wrote a story saying that he's probably at the tip of the spear on what's going to be an accelerating trend because, all governments in the West, if you're still pretending to be a democracy, you're under pressure from the citizens as the cost for every form of energy continues to rise, despite all the propaganda from the renewables space that wind and solar are somehow cheap. They're not cheap. Nothing about this is cheap. It's all going to be very costly. It's all going to diminish everyone's standard of living and pretty severely. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here. And so we already, in spite of that, just being the tip of the iceberg, we already see the supposedly conservative party in the UK. I mean, I think the policies, that bill that they were about to pass in Parliament, my God, was just incredibly radical, far exceeded what the EU is doing on boilers and things like that. So I think he's smart politically to back off on this stuff. But as both Arena and Tammy said, he's going to have to go much further than that to have any real chance of winning the election because he did put a little space between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party there in Great Britain, but it's just a little space. And 98% of the media in Britain is still going to be pumping out the propaganda for green energy and net zero. And as long as the prime minister is sitting there saying, I still believe in net zero, which is an impossibility, just based on the laws of physics and thermodynamics, then he's not really putting enough space between conservative and labor. And the Labor Party still probably going to have the advantage in campaigning for office because of all the failures the Conservative Party has brought to the country while it's been in power. And so it's a tough deal for him. I know he's trying to survive politically, but I think these baby steps probably aren't going to be enough for him to do it.
But you believe that President Biden or the candidate President Trump could do the same type of speech?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Trump
Trump would.
He's already way to the right of this and is likely to stay there. He's the drill baby drill candidate and would immediately reverse 80% of the Biden agenda his first day in office. Biden is probably going to have to tack a little bit away from some of the crazy stuff his administration is doing in order to be reelected. And so I think we'll see that happening in the United States. I don't know what's going to happen in Canada, whose government I think has gone stark raving mad, having just given a standing ovation to a former Nazi.
I'm so sorry about this, Tammy. I'm so sorry this is happening to Canada.
I know, it's unbelievable.
The government is insane, literally insane in Canada.
Yeah. And doubling down on net zero. So.
Yeah. Please tell me, it's for you, this one.
So thank you, Christopher. He says there's the Reclaim Party and DUP that voted against the net zero energy bill. There's also the Reform Party, which is I can't remember if Nigel Farage was associated with that one or not, but honestly, they don't get very much coverage. I don't know how many candidates they're planning on running. I don't know if enough people know about them. So yes, okay, there's a few fringe, I would call them unfortunately fringe parties that are against net zero, but they just do not get the coverage.
Right.
And whether or not they're running all those candidates in every riding, I don't know. But, in the UK, in 2008, the Labour Party passed the climate change bill, which allowed for the creation of the Climate Change Committee, and the members are appointed by the minister. And the Climate Change Committee is full of the completely committed net zero zealots. and they keep churning out these recommendations, and these are the 5-year plans for emissions. And their last one was about zero. I forget what it was called, but it was like zero something, where basically they want to change how you eat, how you travel, how you work, how the entire economy, basically degrowth, right? And so as long as the climate change bill is still there, as long as this energy bill, which is before the Lords, I think they're having some debate on it in a couple weeks, but it's probably going to be passed. And so everything Sunak says is really undermined by this energy bill. And they have the climate change committee that's making all these recommendations, not just to the national government in the UK, but to the various councils and stuff to pursue these measures. It's really doesn't do anything to change the trajectory. I mean, it slows it down a little bit. Like David said, it's the first tip of the spear of, okay, people are saying this is crazy expensive. What the heck are you doing? We're not going to have a life. And which comes back to, I think, what we've been saying for a long time is that if the public understood what all of this is about, how much it will cost, what it's going to do, they would say no.
Yeah.
And,
That's why they're
if they
not
could,
saying it. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Irina, and the car industry, what do you see the expectation for after this fantastic speech?
Well, I don't know. Apparently, Ford is strongly against this delay, which the head of Ford UK said in no uncertain terms that what the car industry needs from the government is, what was it, commitment, consistency, and a third thing. And we're not getting that. I can understand that. Of course, any business, any industry would want consistency and predictability from the political class. But I think the lady was actually worried that Ford and other car makers have already invested so much in EVs. Right. And they're basically banking on the fact that they will become compulsory at some point,
right,
which will allow them to recoup some of their losses that they're incurring right now. But this is not happening. So obviously they're outraged, but not everyone is against it. As you said, what was it? Jaguar, Land Rover.
Land Rover, yeah.
Thought it was pragmatic. Toyota was also, favorable about this whole thing, because Toyota only recently gave in to the climate change pressure to start working on EVs. Toyota was holding out until the last moment. And Toyota is probably the best-selling car in the world. They know how, cars sell, which cars sell. But even they got pressured into it. I wanted to make another point, however, that the propaganda crew is already in damage control mode. And if you allow me, I'd like to do a very quick dramatic reading from an op-ed for the Financial Times by, don't laugh yet, from Gideon Rackman. He's a regular contributor to the FT, and very, very dramatic. So I'll just quote the lead. Here it goes. Climate news sometimes feels almost too painful to read. I had to force myself to get through last week's report that levels of Antarctic sea ice are shrinking at mind-blowing speeds. But while the environment is telling us to move much faster in the fight against global warming, some political leaders want to slow down. I think we're going to see more of that, a lot more of that, to counter what Rackman again calls a populist wave that is threatening the transition. Because it's not just the UK, it's in France, it's in Sweden, and it's coming to other countries as well. So now they're switching to damage control. This is how it feels to me. And they're very, very quick about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, they're very quick.
They have this massive, all these climate change reporters that get funded by the various foundations who are part of Covering Climate Now and various other coalitions, which, is propaganda crazy. And I sent around a link yesterday about the climate guardians. So are they
Oh
going to
my
be
goodness.
another group, funded by Richard Branson and some others that are going to hold the politicians' feet to the fire, so to speak, to feet to the global fire, to slow
And
things,
Biden's creating the new climate corps,
the
right? Which
climate
will be
core. That's
Oh,
right.
made
yeah.
up of brainwashed children who will
Yeah, but they
be
will be planting
thousands and
trees,
thousands of Greta Thunbergs out there
at least.
preaching the propaganda. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to imagine 20,000 youth planting trees and doing hard physical labor.
Oh, and
Maybe it's
meanwhile, Bill
possible.
Gates says planting trees doesn't do any good, right? So, I mean,
Right.
who are you going to believe?
Yeah.
Lebanon, with its generator mafia and associated pollution problems, offers a glimpse of what life will be with net zero. Where are the renewables in Lebanon?
Well,
You
it's
know,
a poor country.
I don't know what's happening in Lebanon, so I can't really offer a comment on that.
Yeah, Robert Bryce has some good information about the generator mafia. He put that in his book, A Question of Power, I think, in his little documentary. But the thing is, they'll just ban the generators.
Sure.
So
Yeah, they're already working on that at the Department of Energy in the U.S.
that's right. Yeah.
And David, and about diesel and petrol, they moved the deadline for banning. What's exactly happening? 5 years
So
postponed.
yeah, so in Britain, I think the first target was 2040, and then Prime Minister Boris Johnson decided he really needed to burnish his green creds and just arbitrarily moved it to 2030, which is completely impossible. Just absolute lunacy. And so Rishi Sunak is splitting the baby, cutting the baby, whatever the phrase is, and going with 2035. None of these are attainable. You're not going to eliminate the internal combustion engine by any of those years. EVs can't do it. They're going to run in. We're going to have a massive train wreck on energy minerals that their batteries require in the next few years. And that's what it's really going to take to really force governments to back off on all this. These half measures by the prime minister and other elected leaders are one thing, but if you're really going to change the direction of all this, it's going to require a huge crisis, because that's always what is required for radical changes in energy policy to develop in democracies. And these countries all still like to call themselves democracies, even with all the authoritarianism that's been ballooning up over the last 4 years. It's always requires a crisis before anything real changes. And there's going to be a crisis where energy minerals are concerned. I've been preaching this for 4 years now.
Yeah.
It's getting closer and closer. I initially thought it would happen probably around 2030. Now I think it's probably going to really happen around 2025 or 26,
Oh, promise.
because of all the forcing that these democracies are engaging in, forcing these companies like Ford. You're right about Ford. They've invested billions and billions in all this infrastructure to make all these EVs that they can't sell.
And they're losing billions. Robert Bryce said that they'll
$67,000 per unit sold this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
They're losing, and they can't sustain this. So their answer is to slam Rishi Sunak for giving them 5 more years to make the transition, when what they really want is for Rishi Sunak to say, oh, guess what? We'll give you billions more in more subsidies.
Yeah.
That's always what the answer, the request and the demand is going to be from Ford and all these other U.S. automakers. And it's not sustainable. None of this is sustainable. None of it is workable. None of it conforms to the laws of physics. And that is my rant for today.
Let me share with you. I made a very short video from the original speech. And please.
I know people in our country are frustrated with our politics. And that starts today, with a new approach to one of the biggest challenges we face: climate change. You don't reach net zero simply by wishing it. And it will require a wholly new kind of politics. Well, first, we need to change the debate. We're stuck between two extremes. Both extremes are wrong. This debate needs more clarity, not more emotion. We'll never force anyone to rip out their existing boiler and replace it with a heat pump. You'll only ever have to make the switch when you're replacing your boiler anyway. And while we'll continue to subsidize energy efficiency, we'll never force any household to do it. The proposal for government to interfere in how many passengers you can have in your car, I've scrapped it. And nor will we ban new oil and gas in the North Sea, which would simply leave us reliant on expensive imported energy from foreign dictators like Putin. Yet we don't have the grid infrastructure to bring that power to households and businesses. And when energy security is national security, so from offshore wind to nuclear to a revolution in our energy infrastructure, investors should have absolute confidence that we're getting on with the job, innovation in new technologies, all while doubling down on the new green industries of the future. Nothing less is acceptable.
Yeah.
He really tried.
That's quite a word salad there.
Yeah,
Almost sounds-
exactly.
sounds like
But he
Kamala
really
Harris
tried.
in that speech.
Yeah, he's been very Jim Matlock.
We need someone in charge of the Railroad Commission that will fight Washington, D.C. and Wall Street against the ESG crap and carbon offsets. Well, so, the commissioners do what they can. I mean, the Railroad Commission has a lot of authority in the state of Texas, very little in Washington. I know Christy Craddock and the others have been very active trying to influence what our congressional delegation does, which is not much. John Cornyn is essentially useless on this matter. Ted Cruz engages every once in a while. And a third of our House members are Democrats who aren't going to do anything related to it. So there's not a lot we can do. What's really been the big problem in Texas is this crazy impeachment that sidelined our attorney general, who was very aggressive fighting the Biden administration for the last 4 months. And that was probably the goal. So as soon as he can get things restarted, we'll see Texas becoming more active in fighting this.
Timmy, you believe that he can be elected easier than before after this speech?
You mean Rishi Sunak? I don't know. People are mad, and he keeps saying, "Oh, we don't need emotion." Oh, okay. Maybe he should talk to his climate change committee, who pretend to be all, academic and scholarly and everything, but everything that they put in their studies and whatnot are really rooted in emotion about, Earth on fire and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, what bothers me about his speech is that it contradicted what's in his energy bill. And as the prime minister, he could have withdrew that bill. He did not withdraw it. It's still there. And the whole thing about I won't force people to renovate their homes. Well, that wasn't taken out of the bill. So by law, so does it just mean he'll send a note that you don't have to enforce the legislation? Is that what he's saying? Because what does that mean? And then his whole point about I'm not going to stop oil and gas development in the North Sea, but he is doing so on the side by having the windfall tax. And as long as there's the windfall tax, the company said it makes no sense for us to try and increase oil and gas production because you're just going to take all the money we make from it anyway. So, that's why they didn't get the bids for opening up some more fields and exploring in the North Sea, because the companies were like, well, why would I bother when you have the windfall tax? But that's okay, because the former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, last week said, let's have a global windfall tax on oil and gas companies of 3% or something. So that's his solution.
3%.
And then we'll put it to climate change. Yeah.
Maybe the case with the retrofitting of houses is only if you want to sell them.
Right.
But same token
Yeah.
as you won't be forced to change your gas boiler unless it is due to change already.
right.
Yeah, maybe something similar to what's happening in Germany will happen in the UK and in other European countries. The Germans just passed this obligatory energy efficiency act, which contains no binding measures. You are obliging industries and public agencies to be more energy efficient, but basically, as far as I understood from the Reuters report, you don't tell them how
It's up to
exactly
them.
you will oblige them.
Right.
But they're
Yeah,
not
so-
binding. So it's obligatory, but it's not binding, which is
Right.
a really nice semantic conundrum. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it
Irina,
also allows the state to take whatever actions they see fit, which leaves it as an arbitrary application.
Exactly.
Irina, do you believe that Mr. Birol is happy with Sunak?
I had the feeling you will ask me about Birol. No, I actually expect him to come with another op-ed similar to Mr. Rackman's to grieve over the U-turn that the UK is making and to warn against other European leaders going the same way, which
And he'll
they
throw
will.
populism in there, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, that's actually the headline of the Rackman column. It's populism could derail the green transition. It's all populism.
How dare the people?
Yeah, suddenly, if a politician is actually looking after the interests and the grievances of the population, he or she is a populist, and that's a bad thing, because politicians should know better than to listen to people. They should push their policies, whatever the way people feel about them. That's totally normal.
But only certain people. So the Just Stop Oil guys and the youth, Fridays for Future Kids, you're supposed to listen to them. That's not populism, though. That's just listening.
No, because they're a minority. Yeah. Selective hearing. Nice.
Yeah. David, do you believe that this speech can contaminate California too?
Oh, probably not. Not as long as Gavin Newsom is governor there. California just keeps going further and further down this path, and bleeding population as it goes, which may be the goal. I don't know. Maybe that's Gavin Newsom's goal, is to cut the population and send them all to the other states. But California is basically to the left of Germany on all this, which is kind of hard to do.
But okay.
So sorry. Go ahead, Lina.
I was just going to say that a lot of the Californians I hear are going to Texas, and I had a chat with Stu the other day, and he said that they're bringing with them their progressive political attitudes, and they're voting Democrat in Texas. So I asked him, why did they leave California if they're so progressive? So why don't they stick with the progressive governor, the progressive?
Because they don't want to pay all the taxes that
but they want to bring the same thing to Texas and make it the same. No, I fail to see the logic in that.
Right.
David, there is a question for you, please.
What is the WTI price that might reverse the negative rig count trend in the USA? That's a great question. I'm not sure there is one that's attainable, and I don't think we want to attain it. Maybe if it got to 150, it would prompt some of these corporations to drill more wells. But I just think they're so profitable doing what they're doing right now. There's no real reason to rock the boat, and and no real reason to drill yourself back down to a lower price. That's I think something that maybe the industry has finally learned in the United States, is that it's really kind of silly to, whenever the price goes up a few dollars, to activate so many rigs that you force prices to go back down to below levels that you were getting previously. It just it's been the constant cycle in our energy, but I think that profit motive may have been wrung out of it finally by this new breed of corporate managers that are in charge of the bigger companies now. And I'm just not sure there is a price that would reverse that trend.
Well, David, do you think that the regulatory changes that the Biden administration has brought in also reduces the possibility or desire to expand production? And what about also difficulties in getting financing? Is that a part of it?
Well, I think that's part of it. That's a big part of it, right? I mean, it is tougher to finance projects. Wall Street is not real interested in lending money to do that because of all the ESG pressure.
Yeah.
The Biden regulatory structure has had some impact. It will have an even bigger impact whenever the SEC gets around to issuing its reporting rules on carbon. And so there are all these other pressures that are preventing the management at these companies from activating a bunch of new rigs and drilling a lot more wells. And it's hard to see how any of that gets reversed. I mean, once it's in effect, I'm not sure even Trump would try to go down that road. It's very complex and time consuming. So I just think we're kind of in a new paradigm in the United States, and ESG, you're right, has played a big role in it, and the financial community, and despite all the propaganda from companies like BlackRock and Vanguard that they're not going to talk about ESG anymore. All that means is they're using different language to talk about the same thing. I mean, none of that's gone away. It's silly to think that any of it has. So those pressures are going to be there. And I think what's happened within these bigger corporate companies is that the boards of directors and the management at most of these companies has just decided to stop trying to fight it.
There is a comment from Christopher.
Antonio Alves de Silva, the net zero carbon 2030 consumption target is zero private vehicles. Therefore, EVs will not soon be targeted with more and more taxes towards extinction. I've heard on EV Cafe that new taxes are coming already.
I think it'll be ride sharing. This is what they promote in China. So they have what their version of Uber called Didi, and you just match up with carpooling and doing these different kinds of things. So I could totally see that, whether it's promoting public transport or walking or biking or ride sharing. And that's the solution Oxford City Council's given to the people who are going to be living in this new temporary test zone starting in January, where they're only allowed to leave their zone 100 and some times a year. And the solution the council gave was, well, you should just call an Uber or do a ride sharing. That's okay. But just don't drive your own car.
How are car makers going to make money?
They'll supply the cars to the Ubers, right? So it'll be an Uber EV, but it's not yours. You don't own it, and you'll lease.
But there will still be millions of them.
Yes,
I don't know, possibly.
If you're ride sharing, you don't need as many cars, do you?
Yeah, that's
right. Well, I don't know. It depends on how much you're traveling.
Yeah. And Tammy made the salient point here is we're going to be doing whatever you see China doing is where these current governments in the Western democracies
that's where they're going.
Want to take us. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very simple, people, if you just pay attention. We're just 20 years behind China. I mean, right now, and the Biden administration and Sunak and all these leaders in Europe are trying to catch up. They're playing catch up now. And the goal is to have you not driving cars, okay? That's the goal. That's the end goal. The goal is having you all living very compact lives with a much lower standard of living without owning anything, as the WEF said. That none of that is a myth. That's where this is. Oh, and the social credit score, of course, will drive all of it.
But China's been raising the standard of living over the past 20 years for its citizens.
Sure they have.
And Dr. Kirkman, social right share.
And they're not banning internal combustion engines. Are they trying so hard to catch up that they'll do anything?
If you leave them in power long enough, yes, they will. I think they will.
Yeah, if you
Really,
leave
I
them
mean,
for long enough.
this is a religion.
It is, yeah.
Victor Garcia, something else. David, for you.
I see the activity on workover rigs increasing while drilling is decreasing, but I don't see the relationship on production numbers. Maybe this is why you are needing as much drilling, which is more expensive to do. I think he meant to say why you're not needing as much drilling. Yeah, workover rig. I mean, yeah, there's companies. I just interviewed the CEO of Diversified Energy, which operates more wells than any on the planet. Here in the United States, the wells to increase production and grow that way, and they've been very successful with that business model. Hillcorp has a fairly similar model that they've been very successful with, and there's a lot of that happening within all the corporate producers are always trying to maximize recoveries from each well, and so that's played a big role in the fact that despite the falling rig count, we still have an increase, a slow increase in overall U.S. production.
Peter LaFontaine. Are
California is facing the same cost of living, interest rates, debt load, homelessness, housing challenges, drug addiction, et cetera. Aren't those the real issues? I think those issues will sway the voters. Well,
That's why they're leaving.
Yeah, I mean, the voters who would vote against that are leaving, right? I mean,
yeah.
Californians are fascinating to me because they just keep electing the same politicians who have done all this to them, and they will keep electing them, by the way.
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom could run for re-election today and win 65% of the vote in California. The voters are completely ill-informed, brainwashed, and they think all of this is good for them.
After this fantastic speech and the world's being, let's say, changed by this speech, what might be the most important conclusions after this speech? Can we start with you, please?
I think the most important conclusion is that we shouldn't stop talking about the cost of net zero, because once it sinks into people and they're starting to wake up to what's the reality of it, what are the costs of it, how is this going to change your standard of living, is your lifestyle going to change? Yes to all of those. And so I think the big message is that once people know what the costs are, what that's going to do to their cost of living, they'll say, no, we don't want this. And so I think we should keep doing what we're doing just to explain, this is impractical. What are the realistic costs behind it? And just keep, repeating that message, because it's important. People need to hear it.
Irina, please.
Absolutely. I don't have anything to add to what Tammy said. We should really keep doing what we're doing, because more and more people are hearing about it, not just from us but from other people who are speaking up. And it's reaching the politicians slowly, but hopefully, surely.
Yeah, right.
I agree. I think y'all summed it up wonderfully, and it's up to us to keep repeating the message, which is what the folks on the other side do incessantly, is repeat the messages. And we're a smaller army, but we are having an impact, and I think we just have to keep going here.
Yeah.
Okay, closing our meeting today, let me share a very short video, please.
We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts.
Oh my God.
Indeed.
Truth.
His own truth. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure being here today.
Great ending.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you,
Y'all have a great week.
everybody. Have a good week.
Have a lovely week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.